was honored to be invited to be the moderator of the panel that will be presenting today. And then, and this is the honest truth, I have a funeral this morning. I have to leave. At 10:30, I have a funeral at Arcadia, and when this all came together, I found myself in a bit of a bind, and normally I wouldn't sneak away, except that this person is the dear old saint of the church, and I must be there for his final rites. I received a very warm letter, and I don't remember now who it's from. I don't have it in front of me, inviting me to be here today and to bring a word of welcome. And it said, enclosed along with this letter is a copy of the program for the day. I must tell you, the sheet was blank. But I know that you're going to have an outstanding program and an exciting program and a full program. And when I realized I couldn't be here for this morning's occasion, I turned to one of our associate ministers here on the staff, and I thought about, we have a number of them who would really do an outstanding job. And I asked the Reverend Marcia Eveland to take my place on the panel. I want you to know a word or two about Marcia. Marcia has been, when I first arrived at this church 10 years ago, Marcia was a layperson in the life of this church. She was involved in the insurance industry. She then decided that something more was calling her in this big world of ours, and so off she went to Yale Divinity School, finished her academic training there, returned to Hawaii, and was ordained into the United Church of Christ. Her first ministry was at the Wahiawa United Church of Christ, which is basically a Korean ancestry congregation. She was the first Caucasian, she was the first female to serve as minister in this congregation. And she survived, and they survived, and had, in fact, a wonderful experience. Well, she brings a little bit of this background to us today. A delightful person, and Marcia, I want to thank you for stepping in and being our moderator. And again, thank you all for coming. Delight to have you here. And this is the kind of thing that really should happen in our community, in our churches, synagogues, and wherever we can come together and share our faith one with another. Thank you.
I too welcome you here today. I've been given the wonderful role of introducing the various speakers. But before I do, I also want to make a small plug for Central Union. We have a group here of young adults that call themselves New Generations, and they're about ages 21 to 40. They came to me a couple of months ago and said they wanted to study various world religions this summer and then move to denominations of the Christian faith in the fall. So we put together a program for the summer where we are inviting speakers on Sundays from the Jewish community, the Buddhist community. We have two Hindu speakers, and the Buddhist speaker is going to be Dorothy Ono, whom I met on another interfaith project, and she works with Project Dana. So for me, this is wonderful. I'm getting to do now what I used to do as an undergraduate years ago, working with comparative religion. If you're free on a Sunday morning this summer at 10:30, you're welcome to come and hear whoever happens to be on the agenda. The first speaker this morning here is Professor Mitsuo Aoki, who is the founding member of the School of Religion for the University of Hawaii in Manoa. I'm told that he has been there so long that he has taught more students on his own than the rest of the School of Religion faculty altogether. I'm impressed. He was born on a plantation on the Big Island, was educated in religion on the mainland, and has his doctorate from the Pacific School of Religion. He has been teaching classes at the UH that have been so popular that at times they've had to go to the varsity theater to fit all of the students in. His work with the dying has encompassed over 35 years and more than 700 people with whom he has sat as they have died. He's currently, I can't believe this part, he's currently over 80 years old and professor emeritus, and he is still teaching a course at the university. I have never heard him speak before, so I am looking forward to this also. Mitz, I welcome you here and give you the podium.
Is there a normal conic? I have your back here. Okay, thank you. It was a stormy evening and the military ships were on maneuver. When the admiral saw in the near distance a huge light approaching his ship, and fearful of a collision, the message went out: "Starboard! Turn right! Turn right!" And the message came back: "You turn right! You turn right!" Oh, he got hoo-hoo, you know. So the message went out: "This is Admiral Charles C. Longworthy. Turn right!" The message came back: "This is Tom Jones." He looked at his military log, no such name, and now the lights are coming closer and closer and fearful of an imminent collision. He said, "This is the mighty flagship. Turn right!" There was a significant pause, and the answer came: "This is a lighthouse." Our subject is a lighthouse. And that's, my friend, death. It's like a lighthouse. We can say turn right, turn left, be silent. We do 1,000 things. It remains light. And in the moments of profound silence as we have in our culture, it still is a light. And whatever it exposes, it manifests. And so my concern this morning is to let death be death, and let us hope that it can manifest within us the courage to affirm it. And so I've been given altogether 1 hour, 4 or 5 minutes for talk and 15 for discussion. But I'm much more concerned about where you are, and many of you have stories to share. So I'm going to talk for about 25 minutes, so we can have 35 minutes of sharing. I rather like that program. Okay? Okay. Whenever I share my views on death, I'm always reminded of a certain patient of mine who died from cancer many years ago. She was a senior citizen whom I invited to sit in my course on death and dying. So I'm always surprised. I see her cop in and cop out all the time in my class, and now she's dying. And in a more tranquil moment, she said to me, she said, "Dr. Aoki, you and I talked so much and understood so much about dying. But now that I'm dying, it's so different. What death looks like is not how it feels like," she said. And I would say over and over, "Right on, Margaret. right on. I just want to remind you, death is not a concept, it's not a meaning. Death always remains death. And I want somehow to manifest its power today. I've been working for some 32 years with dying people. And every time I see a dying person, I'm always reminded that death is not a problem to be solved. It's not a puzzle to be pieced together. It's always a mystery to be experienced. Whatever the deepest meaning of death seems somehow to elude us, I think finally death is always a mystery. And a mystery is not something you capture. Mystery captures us. And we who permit mystery to dominate receives a gift. And the gift is death manifesting its depth. Not us trying to dig from death and squeezing meaning out of it. No, no, no. It's death. It is awesome mystery manifesting its deepest meanings. Yet mystery is not total incomprehension. It's also a gateway to meaning. The Bible says it so well, we see through a glass darkly. That's absolutely right, but we do see enough so we can walk in confidence. I'm always aware that we all have a death awareness. We really know about death as we live our life. And the deeper we can acknowledge our life, the deeper the meanings of death emerges. I know that. So I say to myself, as I say to all of my patients, we have a self-awareness, an awareness that has the courage to affirm this awesome mystery. Now, we all know that one day we must die. Why wait until we actually are dying? Why not, in our self-awareness, having the courage to say, since I am going to die, I must know how to live? Why not? And my friends, let me tell you an amazing story. When you make that kind of self-aware awareness, death always obliges. Now, Michelangelo knew that, and that's what he said. He said, you know, I thought all the time I was learning how to live, and now I know it is teaching me how to die. And in his awareness of his own death, he reached the sublime artistic creativity that is the Sistine Chapel. And I've been there so many times. And what I see is not just the Last Judgment. It was his awareness of death that manifested this awesome painting. And what the painting manifests at its deepest depth is a man who confronted his own death, and death allowed him to touch the deepest creative depth within himself. And there you see, in this magnificent scene, God, Christ, the saints, the angels, man, earth, the whole cosmos put together by this awesome mystery called death. Now, I have only a short time, so I'm going to limit myself to the meaning of death. And I find it necessary to focus on the paradoxical meaning. That is to say, a paradox has two meanings. It's a yes and no at the same time. Like we said, God is far and near at the same time. The Chinese gave us this eloquent symbol, yin-yang. Everything is both far and near, high and low, light and dark, negativity and positive, male and female. And it is that insight I want to bring to the meaning of death. Now remember, there's always one meaning and always there another meaning. One says yes, the other says no. So there's always a tension in every paradoxical meaning. And the tension is resolved by the way you live your life in the midst of death. So let me share only two paradoxes. One is, death is an event. At the same time, the same death is a process. So how can something be an event as well as a flow? But that's the paradox. So let me look at the event. We all know there comes a moment, and it's an awesome moment, when the doctor said, Maki died dead. In Hawaii, nobody just died. I mean, you're Maki and you die and you're dead. You know? But that's the signature. So we know about this event. It's about the future that awaits. So the most awesome images are those about a skeleton that holds a sickle, you remember? It's ready to mow us down. The terrible negative image is about an event, the final day of our life. But we know all about that event. The paradox is that same death is a process. The moment we are born, this process begins. In the midst of life, there's always death. Always death. An amazing paradox is this presence of death in the midst of life that gives us juices. Whenever I go to a chop suey house, I think about not the meat and the vegetable, I think of the juice, the flavor. That's the presence of death, the smell of death, the intuitive, awesome foreshadowing, the thing on your left shoulder. It's always there, my friends. At the very moment I'm speaking to you, death is in this body. Let me just feel it. 5,626 cells died at that moment in this body. I'm told, medically speaking, in 5 months, there's not a single old cell left. So every 5 months, my wife and I need to review our vows. 2 new buggers emerge. That's it, my friends. Death is a process, always operating. Now, let me show 2 awesome consequences of this process that is death. It's the most definitive aspect of a person. See, I can say I can run, I can read, I can love, I can do this, I can do that. But the moment that doctor says you are going to die or you are terminal, that word swallows up all the other potentials of my life. It's the most definitive statement I can hear about the potentials and possibilities of my life. So death is not just another part of life, my friends. It's that part that swallows up all the other possibilities. It can reduce you to nothingness. The Buddhists have said long ago that nothingness contains the wholeness of all things. That's a paradox. So death is not just another part of life, my friends. It's the part that provides the color, the taste, the juice. The other implication of this death as a process, as an element of life, is this. It enables us to be. See, we always think of death as the part that takes us over, and death does its work. Now, if death is a part of us, the most definitive part of us, imagine the power that is available to us. And I can tell you, in my hundreds and hundreds of patients, there are those who had the courage and the grace to choose to die. See, death is not just ceasing to be. It's that moment you can take and make of it, as Jung said, a great achievement. And that's what my patient attempts to do. To affirm this awesome phenomena. And by affirming it, allow it to bring out the deepest emotions, anxiety, hope, and joy. So death then can be a way to be, not just a way to cease being. And I can say to all of us that no one needs to die passively. Everyone can take their dying, the last experience of their life, and make of it an achievement. Michelangelo did it when he painted it. A patient of mine 3 weeks ago did it by smiling and allowing each of his survivors to be near him, touch him as he says, "I love you. Aloha." That's an achievement. So that's the first paradox. Death is surely an event, but it's also at the same time a process, an element that gives to life itself the awesome creativity. The next paradox is life is total negativity, total destruction, total darkness. At the same time, that darkness, that negativity hides the presence of being. That is to say, that total Makedai dead can become for all of us a very healing force, a liberation, a resurrection. Let me just say a few words. All of us know that there is in the midst of our most highest achievement a reminder that that achievement would one day fade away. We are always reminded of our finitude, our limitations. There's an awesome no. And the paradox is only that person who can affirm the no can experience the yes. That's the paradox. I don't need to say anything more about this negativity. See, I'm not sentimental about death. I know it's awesome negativity. But he who can affirm that is able to say, yes, first Hawaiian Bank. And I have seen among my patients that liberating, that healing force. When for the first time they touched depths in themselves they never thought they had. The kind of love that grew into compassion and forgiveness, depth they had never ever grasped or thought of, emerging the last few weeks of their lives. So let me, in conclusion, share simply a life of a CEO who died many years ago. He was told by his doctor he had cancer that had metastasized through his whole body. And like a real businessman said, tell me, give me straight, how long? And he said, at the best, 3 to 6 months. In the second month, dinner time, we went to the living room. And in a circle, he did this amazing act. He stood up, went to each of his children, called them by name, looked at them and said, I love you. 3 of them. And each daughter, each son, somehow felt relieved and free because of this love, to free themselves and demonstrate their love for the dad who was always distant in some way else. And in this moment of this awesome celebration, this man I call Robert said, I want to share with you this commitment I've just made. I have chosen my death, and I shall choose to die. And he said, my hope is, having made this commitment, I am now released to be totally there for all of you. That was his words. See, this is the paradox, isn't it? He who can make a commitment to this awesome negativity is now free to live totally for others. And the 3 extra months he lived, people came to him, especially his business associate, and was awesomely puzzled by this newness of being that is emerging right in front of them, who no longer criticized nor judged, was always receptive and open to the presence of the others, and knew somehow, intuitively, their needs, their comforts, and their joys. And he experienced a new kind of knowing. And he manifested this way. It's a love that is always stronger than death, is how he said it. And on many occasions, I quoted him these words of Paul Tillich that I want to read to you. Paul Tillich, a teacher of mine at Union Theological Seminary, said, love does not seek to abolish death. Rather, it dares to accept death into its own bosom. Love willingly enters the grave and is witness to its power of resurrection. It's an amazing phenomenon. When you can know, as Robert knew, having affirmed and chosen death, he could now live the love that dares to enter into the grave to witness to its resurrection. His final testimony was, he came to know in a new way the radiance and the presence of God. And almost his last words were, life is not for me to keep. It belongs to God. So in his dying, he gave God a gift, the gift of his life. Now we have 20 minutes of sharing and questions if you wish. So the floor is yours. Go ahead. Yes. She mentioned a name that some of you may remember, Randall Tong. A remarkable person who was in the midst of the whole Hawaiian epoch of resurrection. He had to do greatly with Kaho'olawe. And in the pursuit of Kaho'olawe, he came to touch the soul of the Hawaiian people. And they were there lovingly to support him. I worked with him for about 3 months. And his greatest difficulty was somehow communicating with his children. And he spent amazing, miraculous hours in which somehow he was open. And the children somehow became sensitive to the opening. And out of their own depth, there emerged a kind of knowing there was love. He's a remarkable person. There's only one aspect of the wonder that he is. Others who have known him may want to testify to. Wonderful person, Randall Tong. Yes?
You said that we can all make death in bed. Most people die in coma.
Yes. Not most, but there's lots of people who die in coma. Okay, I've worked with lots of coma patients. The one thing I do know is at least their hearing is still there. They can hear you. Now, I'm not going to call this a success, but in one case, only one case, what I told the staff people to keep talking. Positive things, and I asked kinds of music and things that person loved. And she loved Hawaiian music, so I got lots of tapes and played Hawaiian music. And in the meantime, what I always do, put my hand on the stomach and put their hands over mine. And I would say, if you can hear me, put pressure on my hands. Months went by, no pressure. And one day I felt a little tinge of a touch. And I said, oh, I can hear you now. And now that you can hear me too, and in your own self-awareness, I said now, you can start opening your eyes and communicating with me. And I said, when you do that, when you open once, it's yes. When you open twice, it's no. So I would say things, and she would respond, do you understand? She would blink once or blink twice. We were now communicating. And I felt as the families wanted very much to release her. So the time came when they gave their permission, and this person understood and heard. And in 2 weeks, she just went like that. She responded. It's an amazing phenomenon, isn't it? And this is just one example. So even in coma, there's something that may still happen. If you ask me why, the answer is very simple. A mystery. But it's happening right in front of you. Yes, way in the back. Would you stand so we can all hear you?
How does suicide fit into the paradox?
The question is how does suicide be explained in terms of the paradox? I wish you hadn't asked that question. I teach a course on death and dying. I spent 4 lectures on suicide. And I quote great authorities. Edwin Snyderman is one of those men. And he said, in all of his profundity and humility, if you have 10 people, they have 10 different explanations. I'm saying that to say it's difficult to give an appropriate answer to this question. But let me try. What you just heard was a silence. Now I got to knock on the silence and see what kind of answer comes from the answer, from the knocking. The answer is very simple. Suicide cannot be explained by paradoxes. Next question, please.
What made you interested in this subject and in religion in particular? Any particular events that did that?
The question is, what motivated me to stand up and give you a talk on death and dying and teaching and so forth? Well, the answer is, I died once. I had a near-death experience. I really didn't die. I came very close to death. And that's what propelled me to do this work. I had never thought of doing work with dying people. And that experience catapulted me. And it's interesting that the only thing I really wanted to convey was to say, no fear. No fear. See, because of the experience, I have absolutely no fear of death. And many people who've had a similar experience called near-death experience have the same feeling that there's nothing to fear. About death. About dying may be a different story. But no fear. But that's the story. Yes?
Since you came back from a near-death experience, and also since many people who have been diagnosed by their doctors as terminally ill and only with a few months or weeks to live, have in fact had a miraculous recovery and, like you, been able to return to life, how do you deal with the problem of deciding whether to help someone who is ill to struggle back to life and to health, or whether to help them with choosing a conscious and a beautiful death?
Yeah. You heard the question back there? Otherwise, I will repeat it. You heard? Okay. Now, one of the consequences of a near-death experience is that there's no question. No question. You got to repair a gift, and you find yourself working with dying people. It's not a choice. It's not a choice. You're there. That's one way of saying it. This is very true.
I'm wondering, people's dying, it's influenced by whether or not they feel or believe there's an afterlife, that they're going through something that opens out into something else.
The question is about afterlife, life after death. And how does that affect a person dying? My answer is very simple. I believe in the continuity of life. I'm not talking about some theological explanation of life after death. I'm simply saying there is, in life itself, there's awesome evolution from a single cell until we appear, very late. But we appear. In other words, there's always a continuity, continuity, continuity. And the best example I heard was last Saturday at the Hongpo Hongguanji, when Dr. Ames was explaining the Chinese sense of continuity. He was at Macau, the little territory beside Hong Kong, lots of gambling. And a person is taking a big, I forget, $10,000 bill and he's burning it. Another guy is burning on a $1,000 bill. So he inquires, how come? And both of them say, well, our ancestors need money. No, they have their own existence. But how come the difference between, I think he said, $1 million and 1,000? And the $1,000 man said, well, they need changes, don't they? It's a good example of the continuity. And if you believe in culture that affirms the continuity of life, then you make great deal of ancestors, don't you? This is one example of life after death. Now, I didn't say in theological terms, I simply in terms of this awesome evidential fact. There is a continuity of life. And I happen to believe theologically too. And those of us who've had near-death experience always understood that there is yet to come a journey. And perhaps it's only by somehow our living this critical mass called body and all the five senses that we may somehow evolve on another level. Without the senses, we have another kind of empowerment on this journey. So in one sense, some of you are looking here at this could be an angel, or professor of religion, a husband, a lover, a gardener. Or some people say, she looked like a devil. Part of the continuity of consciousness. That's my answer to this afterlife. And I always share my experience with my patients, and it seems to bring some kind of hope. Really amazing kind of hope. And for some of them, that hope becomes a seed. And if they nourish it with their will, with their love, the seed turns into an awesome flower called resurrection. Okay. Rob?
Yes, you didn't respond fully. You didn't respond fully to an earlier question about how to treat a patient who has been given fatal diagnosis, but who might recover.
The question is that I had not really answered the question. Let me tell you my secret. I shouldn't say I deliberately, but the back of my mind goes something like this. See, I'm a professor, and for 38 years at the university, I've had nothing but questions asked. And I've learned what this amazing poet and philosopher, Marie Rilke, the German poet, said. Let people live their questions. Don't provide them answers, because answers are something you have experienced. And if a student have not lived those experiences, do not give them your answer. Tell them to live their question and then affirm. So if I were to take seriously what you just asked me, I would throw it back to her and ask her, you raised the question, now tell us what was back of the question. What would that be?
Well, what was in back of the question was the experience of doctors having given up on my former husband and my not giving up, and thinking about, well, what if I had turned to the hospice movement for this? So I have some issues over that.
You see the point I'm making? No, see, that illumines very well. If I had answered that, I would have falsified something. That's from having become a professor for 38 years. We have time for one more question, or one more affirmation. Go ahead.
I just want to say something. I took your class 10 years ago at the University of Hawaii, and I don't really have a question. My heart's just full of gratitude to you. And I'm a teacher now, and everywhere I go, I share a lot of what you taught me. And so I just want to say thank you, and you've helped my heart grow and expand enormously. Thank you. Very much.
What I just did, I gave him a bill.
But I had to hear you. Thank you. Our next speaker this morning is Dr. Kristen Pelzer, who is slowly wending her way up this way. She's had a lifelong involvement with Vietnam. Her degree is in political science, and she taught at Cornell University before coming here, and I pointed out to her that obviously she needed to get warm. If you've ever been in the Finger Lakes, you know why she's here now. At the UH, she is in Hawaiian, Asian, and Pacific Studies. She is a professor for Southeast Asian culture, and her specialty is the culture of the...
Good morning. Our meeting today at Central Union Church is really a significant event in the Buddhist-Christian dialogue, which is a speciality of Hawaii. And I'd like to add that the organizer of this course, David Chappell, is a wizard of Buddhist-Christian dialogue. I'd like to thank him and also Lekshe Karmatsomo for having organized this wonderful course. I'd like to start with a line from a Vietnamese Buddhist poem. Life in this world is like foam on the waves. The multiplicity of forms is nothing but illusion. These words come from a poem written about 200 years ago, around the year 1800. The author is Vietnam's greatest poet, Nguyen Dư. Life in this world is like foam on the waves. The multiplicity of forms is nothing but illusion. I think one could repeat these two lines over and over again like a mantra, and when one finally understood them, one would achieve enlightenment. One would achieve the mind of detachment from this world of suffering. Life in this world is like foam on the waves. The multiplicity of form is nothing but illusion. There's often an Orientalist mystique about Asian culture and Asian Eastern religion. Kipling said it best, "East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet, till earth and sky stand presently at God's great judgment seat." Kipling was the British poet of empire par excellence, and when he wrote those lines, the British Empire was at its height. But we in Hawaii can relate to these Vietnamese Buddhist lines. We live surrounded by foam on the waves. And what do those words mean, the multiplicity of forms? That's all of us. Our arms, our legs, the chairs on which we sit, this building, Central Union Church, nothing of this is permanent. Imagine that the land on which we are now is like the ocean, ever-changing, fluid, in motion. Buildings and trees rise and fall like the waves. 200 years ago, when Nguyen Dư wrote his poetry, the land on which we now sit perhaps was taro fields. Before that, perhaps, there was a Hawaiian heiau on this land, or perhaps the clash of battle. Life in this world is like foam on the waves. The multiplicity of forms is nothing but illusion. I don't think that these lines are part of an esoteric foreign culture.
There's an equivalent in your own culture, in your own background, whatever it is. If your cultural heritage is another Buddhist Asian country, it will be easy for you to find an equivalent in your own cultural background. But many of us here, most of us here, share a Euro-American culture, at least from small kid time in school. We learned in school to sing around. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. How many of you know that song? How many of you have learned that song? Right? It's a Buddhist mantra. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. That's the Buddhist mantra from New England, the New England culture that I came from, where I went to Sunday school in the Congregational Church, much like this one, in New Haven, Connecticut, where the 3 congregational churches on the green were the model for this Central Union campus. When I moved to Honolulu in 1989, the first time I drove by the corner of Punahou and Beretania, I did a double take. The churches looked just like the New Haven green, but there were palm trees instead of maples. And the buildings here are stone instead of whitewashed. The Vietnamese poet Nguyen Du wrote these lines as part of a long poem written for the Buddhist festival for the wandering souls. Another term for wandering souls is hungry ghosts, a term that you've heard many times in this course. The Vietnamese Buddhist culture speaks of the 10 categories of hungry ghosts or wandering souls. These include soldiers who died in battle, politicians and generals fallen from power, sailors who die at sea, the homeless who die by the side of the road, prostitutes who die without a family of their own, children who die in infancy. Nguyen Du's poem is so beautiful that it quickly replaced the formal Buddhist liturgy. To this day, it is recited in Vietnam for the Festival of the Wandering Souls, calling the Wandering Souls, which is on the night of the full moon of the 7th month of the lunar calendar. By our solar calendar, this falls sometime in August, sometimes in early September. On that night, food and drink is put out for the lost souls, the hungry ghosts, and prayers are recited for the salvation of their souls. The equivalent in our American culture is Halloween, when candy and apples are offered to hungry little ghosts and goblins. And the other equivalent, of course, is the prayers offered for the departed by various religious denominations. Nguyen Du was born in the year 1765. The 200th anniversary of his birth was the year 1965. That was the year that the Vietnam conflict escalated into a major war, as President Lyndon Johnson sent thousands of troops to try to stave off defeat of the government of South Vietnam. In commemoration of the 200th anniversary of Nguyen Du's birth, an English translation of Nguyen Du's poem Calling the Wandering Souls was published in Hanoi in 1965 in an English language publication called Vietnamese Studies. Now, 20 years after the end of the Vietnam War in 1975, the souls of American soldiers who died in that war are among the hungry ghosts for whom Vietnamese villagers put out food and water when they pray for the salvation of the souls of the unhappy dead. Although some of the language is archaic and there are obsolete references to kings, most of the poem has a powerful contemporary relevance, a universality. Let me read it to you. Calling the Wandering Souls. In this 7th month, the rain is endless. The cold penetrates dry bones. The autumn evening is mournful and sad. Reeds turn livid, leaves wither. In the twilight, birch trees droop. Pear trees are shrouded in mist.
Who can remain unmoved? The world of the living is sad, but sadder still is the world of the dead. In the pitch darkness of eternal night, appear, lost souls, reveal your presence. Unfortunate beings, creatures of the 10 categories, your abandoned souls roam in strange lands. No incense burns for you, high class and low, scholars and illiterates, you wander helpless in the night. In these days of early autumn, here is your altar of redemption. We sprinkle holy water with willow branches and pray that merciful Buddha will save you from your suffering and take your souls to the promised land. There are those who pursued glory, who dreamed of conquest and power. Why evoke the days of epic battles when subsequent misfortunes brought great sorrow? They came to envy the lives of the humble, for power and riches make bitter enemies. Their blood has been shed, now their dry bones crumble into dust. Abandoned souls wander, headless ghosts wail in the rainy night. Success or failure is up to fate. Will these lost souls ever find salvation? There are those who lived in protected palaces, priding themselves on their wealth and beauty. Then the storm came and thrones changed hands. Their frail bodies could find no shelter. Like the stream which winds by the great palace, nothing in this world remains still. Broken are the beautiful hair ornaments and vases, silenced the voices and the laughter. No one will pick up the shattered bones. No one will burn incense for them. Their forlorn souls are wandering in forests by cold streams, their frail hands, pampered and delicate, wither with each passing night and decay with each passing year. There are those who were high officials, wielding great power. With one stroke of the pen, they sent men to their death. They were masters of the arts of politics and rule. Pomp and power engendered fear and hatred. Now their ghosts haunt their tombs. 1,000 tales of gold will not bring them back to life. Gone forever is their power. No love redeems them. No one offers incense or water to their souls. Benighted they stumble on deserted paths. Their karma is heavy. Atonement will be a long, long road. There are those who at the head of proud armies sacked palaces and overturned thrones. In displays of their might like thunder and lightning, thousands were killed for the glory of one man. Then came defeat, and the battlefield was strewn with corpses. The unclaimed bones lie somewhere in a faraway land. The rain lashes down, and the wind howls. Who will now evoke their memory? There are those who pursued riches, preferring wealth to food and sleep, with no children or relatives to inherit their fortune, with no one to hear their last words. Their riches disperse like the passing clouds. While living, their hands were full of gold. Departing this world, they could not take a single coin. At their funeral, hired mourners feigned sorrow. Their cheap coffins were taken hastily in the night. Lost souls, they roam the flooded rice fields with no offerings of incense or of water. There are those who sought academic honors. To the cities they went in hope of high positions. But do degrees always bring success? One day they lay sick at a roadside inn, far from the love and care of their families. Dead, they were hastily buried, far from their dear ones and their ancestral home. In abandoned burial grounds they lie, their lonely souls wander, no one honors them with offerings. There are those who sailed on rivers and oceans to remote places, blown by the east wind. Storms sent their ships to the bottom. They became food for sharks. There are those who had been traders, their shoulders aching under the load of their merchandise. They died of exposure far from home, on unknown roads. their souls now wander lost. There are those who conscripted left their families to serve the king. Taken to distant lands, they lived on small rations and suffering. In wartime, human lives are cheap, sacrificial offerings to fire and to sword. Their souls now flicker with a ghostly glow. We mourn for them on this black night. There are those who spoiled their lives, selling their charms and their smiles. Abandoned by all when their youth was gone, they had no husbands or children to comfort them. In their life, nothing but humiliation and suffering. After death, only offerings from kind strangers. The fate of these women is pitiful. No one knows why this was their destiny. There are those who spent their lives begging. Homeless, they slept under bridges or on the ground. Yet like the others, they were human beings too. They lived on charity and lie in unmarked graves. There are those who were victims of injustice. Falsely accused, they languished in jail. When they died, they were buried near the prison wall. A tattered mat was their only shroud and coffin. Will their innocence ever be revealed? There are babies born in an unlucky hour who lived only a few moments. No mother cradles them now or watches their first steps. Heartrending are their feeble cries. There are those whose lives were cut short by drowning, falling from trees or into wells. Those who were washed away by strong currents, who perished in fires, who were devoured by wolves or crushed by elephants. There are those who gave birth to stillborn babies, who died from miscarriage or from severe wounds. Struck down by fate on the path of life, they followed each other to the other world. Each bearing their karma, all met their destiny. Where are they now, these lost souls? They're hiding somewhere. Some are among the trees, some along the streams and up in the clouds. Some are in the grass and in the bushes. Some are wandering aimlessly by roadside inns and under bridges. Some seek shelter in temples and in pagodas. Others haunt markets, riverbanks, barren lands, and bamboo groves. Misery was their lot while alive. Now in the cold, their corpses wither. Year after year, exposed to wind and rain, on the cold ground they lie, sighing. At dawn, when the cock crows, they flee. They grope their way back as soon as the sun sets. On this dark night, the lost souls pass by in droves, proceeding with uncertain steps, carrying the children, supporting the old. The earth shivers with their cries. Spirits in torment, listen to our prayers for you. May Buddha save you from the cycle of rebirth. May his light free you from suffering and illuminate the darkness. May his peace reign in the universe. May he wash away all sorrow and hatred. Spirits in torment, we pray for your souls. May Buddha's all-powerful law hold sway. Let a seraph lead the procession with the sacred banner. All of you, people of the 10 categories, young and old, men and women, come and listen to our prayers. Life in this world is like foam on the waves. The multiplicity of forms is nothing but illusion. May Buddha's blessings in your heart save you from the cycle of suffering. On this altar of mercy, with Buddhist rites, we offer you some rice soup and a little incense, some paper clothing for the soul in flight. These we offer in hope that you may find the way to peace. We hope you use them on your way to heaven. All you who are gathered here, wait. Our offerings are modest, but please take them. Buddha's blessings will make much of little. He gives something to everyone. His mercy makes the soul whole. Fear no more the torment of living or not living. Praise be to Buddha, to his law, to his disciples. Salvation for all. I never believed in ghosts until I became friends with a number of American Vietnam veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. They seemed haunted by the war. For them, it is still a daily reality. Some have not had a peaceful night's sleep for over 20 years. Nightmares of battle awake them every night. Many Americans who have spent time in Vietnam have been very influenced by the strong Vietnamese belief in ghosts and spirits. One example appears in an American Vietnam War novel called Dog Soldiers. The following is an excerpt from a conversation in a Saigon bar during the war between the main character, a newly arrived journalist named Converse, and an old-timer named Ian. Quote, "Wherever you have a lot of unhappy people dying young," said Converse, "you get a lot of ghosts." "We had a right bastard of a ghost down in our village," Ian Percy said. "One of the sort they call Ma'a. He lived under a banyan tree and he came out during siesta to frighten the kiddies." After the war, Converse said, they should fly over the Ya Drang Valley, dropping comic books and French dip sandwiches for all the GI Ma'a, that's ghosts. It must really be a drag for them. Ian started another beer, ignoring the food before him. "I'm not sure you've been here long enough," he told Converse, "to talk like that." In Vietnam, continuing the tradition invoked in Nguyen Du's poem, Vietnamese peasants include the ghosts of American war dead in their yearly Buddhist rituals of purification. I asked a young Vietnamese woman studying as a library intern at the University of Hawaii what she did in her hometown near Hanoi on the night of the Wandering Souls, the 15th day of the 7th month by the lunar calendar. "We make paper clothes," she explained excitedly. "We make everything that a person would need, but out of paper. Shoes, slippers, watches, motor scooters. Then they're burned and the ashes are put in water so that they can be carried to the underworld. This is done at night. Night is day for ghosts." I asked her if she knew Nguyen Du's poem, and she did. I asked her whether on that night Vietnamese thought of the American soldiers who died during the Vietnam War. "Oh yes," she said, "and the French and the Japanese. You know, the Japanese were in Vietnam in World War II. She went on to explain that in the pagodas they put out bowls of rice gruel and water for the hungry ghosts on that night when the moon is full. Every culture has its own way of remembering and honoring the dead, including religious ritual, song, poetry, and flowers. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone? Gone to graveyards, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? And where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing, where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago, where have all the graveyards gone? Gone to flowers, everyone. When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? The poppies sold on Memorial Day represent the flowers growing where American soldiers fell and were buried in Europe during World War I. There's a famous poem commemorating American soldiers who lie in European war graves. In Flanders field where poppies blow, among the crosses, row on row. What flowers now grow on Vietnam's former battlefields? Perhaps it's time to send a U.S. botanical search team to look for the healing flower of remembrance on the battlefields of Vietnam. After World War II, a book which was to become one of the classics of war literature appeared in Japan. It was later made into a lyrical film, Harp of Burma. Harp of Burma tells the story of a Japanese soldier who, on his own initiative, left his unit at the end of the war to stay in Burma, disguised as a Burmese Buddhist monk, in order to bury and give rites to the Japanese war dead. He invented new rituals, a combination of Japanese ceremony and Burmese Buddhist materials, combination of Shintoism and Buddhism, and offered prayers to their souls in hopes that this would soothe the transition and the soldiers' souls would rest in peace. The equivalent is very needed on the battlefields of Vietnam. Most of the Vietnam veterans with whom I've discussed the idea have been in strong agreement. They've developed their own methods of spiritual purification, of laying their personal ghosts to rest, and many have returned to Vietnam in some healing, constructive capacity. They have not just waited for a change in government policy. As in the Harp of Burma, men and women of goodwill have undertaken personal initiatives, each according to his or her own religious, spiritual, and moral practice, in order to move towards closure of a war which never officially began and has yet to officially end. The word karma sounds heavy and inexorable, but in Buddhist philosophy, it is simply the sum total of each individual's actions, thoughts, and decisions. The Vietnam War was made day by day, not only by government policy, but also by millions of individual decisions to accept the call to go to Vietnam or not, to shoot or not, to protest or not. Peace is being made person by person, step by step, in the same incremental way. We are all part of nature. War accelerates our return. And so war after war, generation after generation, the circle song, "Where have all the flowers gone?" repeats itself. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We all fertilize the earth sooner or later. Why make it sooner? Perhaps we humans created war to give ourselves the illusion that it is we who control death. In war, the young, who still feel immortal, are sent off by their elders to kill and to die. During wartime, in a reversal of the natural process, young men die before their fathers. To grow older is to experience the intense intimacy of our own inexorable advance towards our own death. Stories of sacrifice of children by their parents are in the Bible and in the Greco-Roman cultural heritage. Isaac was willing to kill his own son to please the Old Testament's God the Father. Agamemnon killed his daughter to raise the winds for war. So it was. Times can change. As the years have gone by, America's Vietnam veterans, those who survived the threat of death in battle, as well as those in the anti-war movement who protested the death-dealing war and its Vietnamese and American casualties, have had to face the lonely intimacy of their own personal death, stripped naked of any patriotic or political cause or righteousness. In this private and intimate battle, in which death is always the victor, some have chosen the illusion of victory by taking control of the timing and die by their own hands. More Vietnam veterans have died by suicide and suicidal one-car accidents than those who died in battle in Vietnam and have their names on the memorial wall in Washington. War, so much killing, so sad, so unnecessary. Death comes to us all sooner or later. We think we have all the time in the world, then suddenly it's all over. No need to hurry the process. We all die soon enough as it is. Flowers and gardens, trees and forests are nature's healers. They have within them the power to lighten burdened souls. We can look for them to help in the difficult task of transforming the lead of post-war anger, pain, and resentment into the gold of love, forgiveness, and reconciliation. During the Middle Ages, alchemists searched for a philosopher's stone which could turn lead into gold. Modern science can now turn lead into gold, but the process costs more than the product's weight in gold. Nature is the world's oldest and still the greatest alchemist. Nature can turn a tiny seed into flowers with a minimum of sunlight, earth, water, and time. In Vietnam's Buddhist culture, the symbol of purity and of purification is the lotus flower, the most elegant and spiritual of water lilies, which grows from the muck and mud of the bottom of a lake or pond. The secret of the most beautiful blossoms is in the compost. Nature knows how to process negativity. Kitchen scraps are turned into food and flowers by the alchemy of compost and gardening. Manure blossoms into roses. Nature's alchemy is all around us, wherever we are. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. Swiftly comes the dawn. Darkness into light. Humans add their alchemy to that of nature. Lemons are transformed into lemonade. Americans take lemon, sour, and with a bit of water, ice, and sugar, hey presto, lemonade, it's easy. Let's think cross-culturally too. Vietnamese lemonade is flavored with salt instead of sugar. The Vietnamese word for America, Mỹ, also means beautiful. Vuon Viet Mỹ means beautiful Vietnamese garden, but could also mean Vietnamese American garden. America could plant a flower and a tree for every bomb dropped on Vietnam. We could plant a flower and a tree for every Vietnamese and American who died there during the war. Young Americans were sent to Vietnam in the 60s and 70s with guns and bombs. In the 90s, young Americans could go to Vietnam with shovels to plant trees, forests, and gardens. American and Vietnamese volunteers could work together to plant forests and link gardens of fruit trees, flowers, and healing herbs with a network of peace pilgrimage trails as a community legacy for generations to come. We could organize such a project to bring the youthful energies and enthusiasm of idealistic and environmentally conscious young American men and women to Vietnam. Such a project would not only replant Vietnam's defoliated mountains and valleys, but would also regreen America's faith in our own essential goodness, a major casualty of the Vietnam War. The Peace Corps could add new depth of meaning to its name by organizing brigades of Vietnam veterans. Many veterans have already gone to Vietnam to make their own personal peace or have contributed to the growing number of veteran reconciliation projects. One veteran I know kept a letter for over 20 years, which he had taken from the pocket of a North Vietnamese soldier whom he had killed in battle. Last year, he delivered this letter to the addressee, the young Vietnamese man's mother in Hanoi. When he asked for forgiveness, she replied that it was done. There was no need. Her son would never age. He would be forever 19. Looking between a photograph of himself as a 19-year-old soldier and the silver-haired man in the mirror, he realized the poetic beauty of the Vietnamese woman's remarks and felt a tinge of envy for the young man he had killed. Oh, to be forever 19. This veteran now hopes to spend some time with his wife and children in Vietnam to learn the Vietnamese language and then to teach. I wonder how he'll get by financially. Vietnam is a poor country. A U.S. government could help facilitate the reconciliation dreams of such veterans. Psychologists working for the Veterans Administration often tell Vietnam veterans they should reconcile themselves to their dark side, which they met in Vietnam. Many veterans want to go beyond this advice about reconciliation with their dark side and passionately hope to be able to balance their negative war experiences with concrete acts of reconciliation and reconstruction with the Vietnamese people. Why not begin a government program to help them in their desire to develop their own light side? Young Americans who were born in Vietnam, Vietnamese Americans who barely know their country of origin, could make a contribution through such a project to regreening the land of their ancestors and building a green link, a bridge between their new homeland and their parents' country of origin. The key to peace is consciousness. A mind of anger helps to create war. A mind of compassion and loving kindness is the key to creating peace. Please pray that the anger and resentment between the United States and Vietnam, that's a legacy of the war, be transformed into forgiveness, as in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And that this anger and resentment, mind of anger and resentment, be transformed into the Buddhist concept of mind of compassion and mind of loving kindness. Thank you very much. Do you have some time for questions? I'm not sure how, do you have a little bit of time for questions? Yeah?
I'm a Vietnam vet's wife, and I had to go to the Memorial Day services.
Not hear the question at all.
I'm a Vietnam vet's wife. My husband went to Vietnam when I was 19 years old. I had 2 children. As wives, we went to the airport to say goodbye to our husbands, and then we returned to the airport for some of us. Lucky for me, my husband walked off the airplane, but for some of the wives here, they met their husbands in a box. Just this past Memorial Day, I was up at Punch Bowl with the mayor's memorial services that he gives every year. And I realized then that the Vietnam vets will not be buried there because they had cut it off. And that's the story of our life. You know, we seem to drop out of the mourning, the memorial services, just everything. So we really will be the grave between World War II and Desert Storm, I think. And that's the reality of life, and we need to learn how to survive that. And since my husband's been home since '71, my children and all they grew up together, and they are different. They are different, but they're wonderful. They intend to live life at the fullest. So I didn't expect to do this, and I'm really surprised that I'm standing before you, sharing this story. So I'm blessed with my husband. My husband and I have 4 children, so I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Are there other comments or questions? The floor is open. Lecture?
We often hear the term spirit.
We often hear the term spirit used in the context of Vietnamese Buddhism. Ordinarily, Buddhism does not recognize the concept of spirit or soul. Could you explain how the Vietnamese view that concept?
I think there's probably a great difference between formal religious beliefs as taught in the books and the lived belief of the vast majority of people. So Vietnamese people believe in ghosts. They believe that their ancestors are there with them. Most Vietnamese households, and this includes even Catholic Vietnamese households, have photographs of their ancestors, deceased ancestors, usually on a bureau or something like that. So the spirits of the ancestors are believed to be there, and the basic Vietnamese religious practice is the veneration of the spirits of the ancestors. Another major part of Vietnamese religion is something like the national spirits, the Vietnamese equivalent of the spirit of George Washington or various other benefactors of community and of nation. So those are considered to be very positive spirits. The spirit who protects the village, something like the name of the benefactor of a building in a public place. So those are the spirits that help the living. The spirit of an ancestor will help that family. But the spirits that can cause trouble for the living are particularly those who had died an unhappy death. The first time that I lived in Vietnam was during the war in Saigon in 1971-72. And I lived with a Vietnamese family. They had a little compound that had two-story houses. And there was a bridge between those two houses. And every month, there would be an altar put on a chair on this passageway. And two of the children of that family had to worship the spirits of two old maid aunts who had died many generations ago. And the fear within the family was, because these women had died unmarried and childless, that out of the bitterness of their lives, they could cause that same experience to repeat for families in that household. So these spirits who could cause trouble were not welcomed into the house. They were not among the photographs on the family altar, but they were respected in this liminal space on a bridge in the air between these two houses. And so my first acquaintance with this Vietnamese custom was seeing these two little children, aged 4 and 6, bowing to this chair. And the other experience from living in this family was the father of these children had been a Vietnamese soldier for the Saigon Army, and was also a school teacher, and all school teachers were government civil servants could be called up on reserve. And one of his brothers had disappeared during the war, during the Tet Offensive, and they didn't know what happened to him. So they asked a spirit medium. The spirit medium happened to be his father's third wife, not his mother, but his father's third wife. And the spirit of this brother appeared to them, because he was missing in action. They did not know what had happened to him. So the spirit of this brother-in-law appeared to him, appeared through the spirit medium, and said that during the Tet Offensive, he had been killed by a B-52 bomb. And so after that, after having had communication, they felt, from the spirit world, they put his photograph on the family altar. Before that, they didn't know whether he was alive or dead. Yeah. And formally, most like Vietnamese communists, Vietnamese who are members of the Communist Party, formally they should be materialist atheists, not believe in the spirit world. But in fact, the most common excuse for getting out of a meeting in Hanoi is, I have to go to a Death Day anniversary for someone in my family. And the first time that I visited Vietnam after the war with researchers from the Vietnam Social Science Research Institute, I traveled to Saigon with 3 scholars from Hanoi. And one of them showed me a bunch of incense and said, no, since I'm a communist, I'm not supposed to believe in spirits, but I just want to tell you that I have this incense and I'm going to my mother's grave. I'm going to pray on my mother's grave. His mother's grave was there in Saigon. So there's a very deep belief in both the spirits of the ancestors and the spirits of the unhappy dead in Vietnamese culture. Yeah. Marcia, you had a question?
I want to piggyback it, I guess. How then does this belief affect how they face their own deaths in terms of what's going to happen to them afterwards? With this idea of the unhappy souls. We've heard myths talking about how you enter into the event of your death. You know?
Yeah, yes. There are 2 things. One is that it's very important for Vietnamese to have descendants, because it's only descendants, and particularly male descendants, who can offer food and incense and offering to their ancestors. So Vietnamese consider themselves that after their death, they will be ancestors who will be respected by their descendants and offered incense and food. And so one of the points of the poem about calling the wandering souls is these are the people who, for some reason, they don't have children, or they die an unhappy and violent death. So I think there are 2 things going on. One is the lack of descendants. And the other one is, I think of the lecture the first morning of this course on the importance of one's state of mind at the time of death. And that if one dies in a state of anger, then one will be reborn in an angry world. If one dies in a spirit of loving kindness and compassion, one has a chance to be reborn in the Pure Land. And so I think that one of the reasons for these categories of that seems to explain most of these categories. Either they're people who die without descendants, or they die in a state of mind of confusion and abandonment, like an infant who dies after just a few days or a few hours. It's dying in a state of confusion, of anger, feeling far from home, all of those things. So it's not all spirits are unhappy spirits. And so the aim of the living is to live a good life, to live a life of loving kindness, to process one's anger. I remember reading a comment by an Indian on American culture. It said, Americans pay so much attention to physical hygiene, to the bathroom and things like that, but they don't pay so much attention to mental hygiene, to clearing the negativity, the resentment, the anger from one's mind. I went for several months to a Vipassana meditation here in Honolulu, in Kahala, and the people who had the easiest time meditating were a number of Vietnamese there. There's a Vietnamese taxi driver. It's part of the culture, and it's expected as part of the culture that it's not all right to have anger. We think, oh, it's good to have anger, let it out, expressive, it helps to be assertive, right? That's not the Buddhist or the Vietnamese viewpoint. It's not okay to be angry, resentful, and those things. It isn't something that gives you good energy to get on in your life and make it up, be a shark and make it up the corporate ladder or whatever. The idea is that it's not okay to have negative emotions, and it's important to meditate either every day or on various occasions. Like at the period of the death of a relative, Vietnamese will meditate for several days. And part of that is trying to clear whatever, to focus on the relationship with that person who is passed, and to process any negativity so that doesn't hang on. You'll tell me when my time is over. Talk of the time. Yes?
I'm wondering if they believe that people take on a new human life, or
I was just wondering regarding reincarnation. Do they think that persons with God ever take on another human body? And also, I had understood that not everyone would necessarily become a ghost, that perhaps Pure Land, or I don't know which, I don't know of the different kinds of deaths, but that they may not have to be a ghost at all.
Yes, certainly the aim in Vietnam, to take the last part of the question first, certainly the aim in Vietnamese Buddhism, as in all other Buddhisms, is to attain a state of enlightenment. And enlightenment means that you don't have to come back for reincarnation in this world of sorrow, this cycle of suffering. So definitely that's the main aim. The main aim is to achieve enlightenment, to achieve Buddhahood, but there are not that many people who achieve that. The other part of the first part, just remind me the first part of the question. Oh yes, on belief in reincarnation. Yes, the Vietnamese do believe in reincarnation. And there is an amusing story about that by one of the greatest French colonial scholars of Vietnam. And he was talking during the French colonial period, he was talking to a Vietnamese intellectual. And the Vietnamese intellectual said, I don't understand you I don't understand you French. You obviously love Vietnam very much and you want to come live here. But why are you so impatient? Why, since you have this connection in Vietnam, why don't you wait and you will be reincarnated as a Vietnamese in a future lifetime?
then why do they continue honoring the ancestors if perhaps they may have reincarnated in the meantime? Could you repeat the question?
I don't know. The answer to that is, I don't know. So perhaps one of the speakers this afternoon will have, you might ask that question again.
Could you
Yeah?
please repeat the question?
The question was, if there's a possibility that an ancestor might have reincarnated, why are there offerings to them? I think part of it is that while they are still in the mind of their descendants, it's proper to make offerings to them. But let's say someone else might have another answer to that. Yes?
There are people from the Big Island here.
Are there people here from the Big Island?
Yeah. Are they? I have
Anyone here from the Big Island? I guess not.
Well, when the volcano erupts, you go out from any part of from Hilo or Hamakua. If they pass, there's a old reservoir at 21 miles before you come to Volcano House, and we live up that district. And my father goes to a friend and don't come back till so late. And he said every time after 12 o'clock, if he passes there, he said, he thinks it's a ghost, I don't know. He said that it doesn't affect the dog, but the horse just stand up on his hind legs. He always told us that, and he said, he just wondered what it was.
Yeah, plenty stories of ghosts in Hawaii. She was telling the story of a place near the volcano on the Big Island, where there seems to be spirit disturbance, and it doesn't bother dogs, but horses rear up. Yes, I've heard plenty of ghost stories since I've come here, plenty of belief in spirits.
It's my father, so I cannot know
Yeah.
that.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
What is the relationship between the government and religion in Vietnam?
The question is, what is the relationship between government and religion in Vietnam? That's a big topic. Formally, there is and has been freedom of religion. In fact, there have been a lot of religious disputes between religious practitioners and governments, both in North Vietnam and South Vietnam before the war, and since the end of the war and reunification, between religious groups and the government. Basically, although there was formally freedom of religion, until about 5 years ago, the freedom of worship, and particularly the freedom to train monks, nuns, and Catholic clergymen was very restricted. And particularly the training within the church and temple was very restricted. As part of the liberalization campaign that has gone on in Vietnam since 1986, there is a great deal more freedom of religion now. Since when I visited, when I was in Vietnam in summer of 1990, I went to a Buddhist pagoda in which there had just been the first training course for monks and for educating monks and nuns in the Dharma. The first training course like this in I think 2 decades. So there's what's going on now in Vietnam, I guess with the collapse of communist governments and communist ideologies in most countries in the world. What's going on is a great cultural and religious revival. This is going on in Vietnam as in China, and a lot of the old beliefs, whether Taoist or Buddhist or Christian, so on, are becoming strengthened, as well as the introduction of foreign religious beliefs. Yeah, that answers your question. Yes, another question here?
You spoke a great deal about rituals to help veterans. I wonder, how do you feel about the programs in Hawaii as compared to those in Vietnam?
The program, you asked about the programs for veterans in Hawaii. I'm afraid that I don't know enough about that. I'd be very, if that's something that you know about, I would be interested in talking to you about it afterwards. One of my former students at the university worked with the Veterans Administration here, but I don't know enough about what they're doing here compared to what they're doing on the mainland to really make a good answer to that. Looks like that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for all that information about Vietnam. Our next speaker is one that I am excited about having here. His name is Sulak Shivaraksha. He is a professor who was born in Siam, attended St. David's University in Wales, and was called to the bar in London. This is truly a man who has been world educated. He's been a visiting professor at the University of California in Berkeley, at Cornell University, at the University of Toronto, and at the University of Hawaii in Hawaii. He is the author of many books. One of his most recent is called Seeds of Peace, a Buddhist Vision for Renewing Society. He's considered to be one of Thailand's leading intellectuals and he is also one of Thailand's social critics. Because of his work, his outstanding work as a Buddhist social activist seeking to bring peace and justice to Siam, and as the founder of many organizations having to do with this subject and this work, he has been arrested several times by dictatorial regimes. And because of this very courageous work that he has done for his country, he has twice been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, once in 1993 and again in 1994. He currently joins us here today as the Numata Distinguished Visiting Professor of the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I am very pleased to present to all of you Professor Sulak Shivaraksha.
In Thai we say สวัสดีครับ Aloha. I don't refer to my country as Thailand. If you want to know, I can explain to you later. I refer to my country as Siam, which is supposed to be a Buddhist kingdom with a population of 56 million. It has about 300,000 monks and around 30,000 monasteries or temples. It also has 2 million prostitutes, of whom about 800,000 are under 16. These figures came about after the Vietnam War. Before the war, the number was much smaller. Because in the Vietnam War, Siam was a place for R&R for American GIs. At a recent AIDS meeting in Bangkok, a medical doctor reported that many prostitutes have now contracted HIV. The first AIDS case reported in Siam was in September 1984. He was a young Thai man who had returned from the United States and found to be infected with the AIDS virus. The patient died 2 months later. The case history of the patient shows active homosexuality. Many other subsequent cases of AIDS were also found to be associated with homosexuality. Since 1987, HIV positive blood tests have increased among drug addicts, mostly due to sharing needles. Up to 15 October 1989, 86% of the 10,821 positive HIV blood tests were related to drug injections, introducing the virus through the veins. Among this number, only 392, or 4.3%, were female. Since mid-1989, AIDS has spread to the prostitutes of Siam. In some high-risk areas, as high as 40% of prostitutes show positive HIV blood tests. The danger of widespread AIDS in the general public of Siam is now very real. The Deputy Minister of Public Health reported the following figures on May 31, 1990. There were 43 full-blown cases of AIDS-related patients, and 119 of them were still living then. The ones showing HIV positive were 17,313, and 17,198 were still living. The most alarming figures during the same period was that 2% of the draftees of the military services were HIV positive. Since 1990, there has been a colossal increase. The Thai government has now admitted 600,000 Thais are infected with HIV. The Public Health Ministry in Bangkok recently stated that between September 1984 and 31st January 1995, there have been 15,665 cases of full-blown AIDS recorded in the city. The true figure is likely to be much higher. A case of major interest is the 25th case of AIDS in Siam found in August 1989. A Hill tribe girl in the north, aged 1 year and 5 months. It was found that after her mother was 7 months pregnant, her father returned from Chiang Mai, a famous city in the north, and on having sexual relations with the mother, AIDS was transmitted to the child. This implied that perhaps as much as 2 years earlier in 1987, AIDS had already spread among the prostitutes in Chiang Mai, and the danger of infection spread to the low-income groups. It is now commonly accepted in Siam that AIDS is a serious problem for all sectors of society. Apart from the general recognition that religion and culture are highly important factors in changing the attitudes and behaviors of people in relation to AIDS, virtually nothing has been done by the Thai government in this direction so far. In Siam, generally the role monks play regarding AIDS is only as important agents to spread information to the public. It is a great pity that the ethical aspects of Buddhism is grossly overlooked. Quite a few books on AIDS in Siam have become available to the public with quite a short period of time. However, most of them are written by people in medical or related professions, with a lot of emphasis on encouraging people to avoid getting infected by AIDS through the so-called sexual relationship. Evidence indicates Buddhist monks themselves understand very little about AIDS. In 1990, the question was raised among a few senior monks in Siam as to whether to exclude AIDS-infected persons from ordination as monks. Clearly, AIDS cannot spread among Buddhist monks who keep their celibacy intact. This fact clearly indicates the lack of understanding of AIDS among Buddhist monks in Siam. Buddhist approaches concentrate on healing spiritually and preparing for death rather than physical recovery. These aspects are grossly overlooked by most of the medical profession and also by Buddhist monks themselves, do not fully comprehend the different types of healing. Traditionally in Siam, there is a strong culture to prepare oneself to die with mindfulness. Death is not something to be afraid of. It is part of life. We should face death with dignity. Meditation on death is recommended to anyone who is seriously committed to Buddhist teachings. All over Siam, there are stories about monks and lay practitioners who die in a sitting meditation position. When an individual knows death will happen in the near future, death can be used as a skillful means for enlightenment. When someone is near to death, a spiritual friend will be there to remind him or her to put the mind on the right frame. This could be a chance for enlightenment or enable a better rebirth. This type of practice can be applied to support AIDS patients. And indeed, the Venerable Alongkot's hospice, there are many peaceful deaths. Meditation on death also helps to reduce anxiety about death, thus allowing patients to live longer and more accepting of their conditions. Dr. Pravet Wasi, a medical man, president of the Thai Inter-Religious Commission for Development, once said that if we are not mindful, 80% of our people in Siam will die, directly or indirectly, as a consequence of AIDS. Hence, in 1991, the Thai Inter-Religious Commission for Development, of which I am the chairman, in collaboration with the International Network of Engaged Buddhists, got some of their concerned members together, monks and laity alike, and established hospice care by persuading a young monk of 41 years old. Phra Alongkot Thikkapanyo of Lopburi in Central Siam became a leading figure in this venture. When Phra Alongkot uses metta, or loving kindness, plus his concern for humanity to care for AIDS patients. Together with Western medicines and traditional herbal treatment, he was and still is very dedicated to this cause. Phra Alongkot's hospice care started with 15 patients. He called it Dhamma Rakshanivaj, home protected by Dhamma. Every morning he leads a puja and a sitting meditation, as well as walking meditation, plus physical exercise. Patients are also encouraged to offer alms to monks as a practice of generosity. The stress was for a clear mind and a concern for less selfishness. After breakfast, 2 volunteer doctors take turns looking after the patients, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Initially, there were many problems. In the early days, many of the monks in the monastery left in fear of the disease, leaving Phra Alongkot to manage the initial patients almost single-handedly. After a difficult experimental year, the monastery managed to expand its activities with financial aid, mostly from the Association François Xavier Bonnou in Switzerland. The Chulapon Foundation, belonging to the king's youngest daughter, also contributed small financial assistance. With such support, Phra Alongkot started his second project on day care or Dhamma Vipala, protected by Dhamma. He built small huts for first stage patients with no sign of infection yet, who could still spread HIV to others, and also for patients at the symptomatic stage. He also cared for patients with AIDS-related complexes who are starting to suffer from HIV-related disease. The monastery now has 50 huts and 20 beds besides. The third project initiated by Phra Alongkot is a home care or Dhamma Dara, Dhamma drops of water. This is a collaboration between Buddhist monks, medical doctors, nurses and volunteers who go to visit patients in their families